Hi, Adam.
Hi, Anthony. So in our last episode, we discussed the latest happenings in Weber World, shared about the making of Jesus Christ Superstar, and shared what songs were giving us life that week. Today, we take a deep dive into the 1973 movie version of Jesus Christ Superstar. And do we have thoughts? Join us today on We Don't Know How to Love Him. Hey all. So, a quick note before we start this episode, and specifically about the content of the episode. So, Anthony and I recorded this episode many months ago, many months before the Hamas-led attack on Israel and the Israeli invasion of the Gaza Strip. We thought it was important to bring that up as this movie takes place in that region. So you won't hear anything about that conflict in the episode, but we did want to share that our hearts go out to all of those who are in danger, who are afraid, and who have lost loved ones. Now, back to the show.
Are you ready to talk about the film? I know you loved it.
I am less excited about the film than I was the history.
Now, have you seen any other versions of the show?
I have.
Okay.
So I decided to go to a used video store.
Okay.
And they had the 1999 movie, I guess, version of it. They consider it, I think, a movie because it's not like a staged version. It's a movie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
90s-tastic.
90s-tastic. All right.
But I really liked it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad I want to hear more about it as we go.
Have you watched anything else?
So I saw this movie in 8th grade. We watched it in my religion class.
We did not watch this movie at my Baptist Christian school in 8th grade.
My Catholic school was very progressive.
Much more than my school was, for sure.
So we actually listened to the 2-disc album, the Brown album, in 6th grade religion class on vinyl.
I never knew how indoctrinated you were into the world of Lloyd Webber.
I know. It really... It's really just Joseph and Jesus Christ Superstar.
I'm so sorry.
And then in 8th grade, we watched the movie. And then I had never seen another production until the NBC one, which I really enjoyed.
I never saw that one, which is horrible.
Well, it's worth a watch. I enjoyed it a lot. In my memory, it was like amazing. But I'm also excited to talk about the film. So let's get into it.
So the conceit of this movie, as we mentioned, is a bunch of kind of free love actors putting on a production, and they arrive in a bus, and they arrive in, I believe, what is Israel and what looks to me as Israel when they get there, kind of the Holy Land. And there's the overture, and then we get into Heaven on Their Minds.
Judas. Now, do you think Judas is the main character of the show?
It's a big sigh. That's a good question. Yes, but then toward the end, no.
Yeah.
After Superstar.
But that is kind of the last song.
Yeah, but then there's the crucifixion.
I know.
Judas isn't there for the crucifixion.
Right. I think they're at least sort of equal players.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And it's certainly a way of telling the story that does put someone else as at least a co-equal.
Yeah.
Sort of performer and player.
It's a big choice.
It is.
Yeah.
What did you think of Heaven on Their Mind? I
think all I can say is I just thought that Carl Anderson was amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
Carl Anderson was brilliant in this. I can't say enough about Carl Anderson.
To me, him and Yvonne Elliman together make the movie, but his part is
we can
so
talk
much
about
bigger. Okay. His part is so much bigger, but to me, he makes the movie.
I agree. Just the passion and energy that he imbibes to everything.
Yeah.
Just so intense.
Yeah, very intense.
In a very, as it should be.
Yeah.
In this story.
Yeah.
So and just the voice too.
Yeah.
Just so good.
And still range too. It's not like he's at a 10 the whole time, but he varies his intensity, but he's always giving a 10 performance.
He is, absolutely. This song reminded me of a song from Evita.
Which one?
I Would Be Good to You.
Oh, really? I'd Be Surprisingly Good for You?
I'll learn the title of that one for the next show. Yes. I don't know why, but there was some.
Well, there were definitely some Evita moments throughout the movie that I had never noticed before.
Yeah.
This one didn't stand out to me, but I don't doubt that there's a connection.
And here's where we get our first sort of awkward meter. That's not the technical term, but something that's not like 3-4-4-4. We get a little 7-8 in the interlude of this one.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, later on, I wrote, like, the time signatures are out of control in the show.
And you told me about Andrew Lloyd Webber and the time signatures.
Yeah.
What was that again?
Well, he's just really into his time signatures. And what I remember from reading his autobiography about this show is that when he knew it was going to be on an album, he really thought about how to use the music to tell the story.
He doesn't normally think about that.
Yeah, I think he likes to use time signatures to, like, shake up the music and to, like, bring some unexpected energy to things. But I feel like in this show, it's like every song is, like, doing
5-4,
yeah.
7-8, all over the place.
All over the place.
So basically in the song, Judas is really upset that Jesus won't listen to him.
Right.
That's kind of the whole thing going on this song. And then we get to What's the Buzz, where his followers are like, what's going on? What's happening? And they're saying this really hip phrase, what's the buzz? I think the phrase ages the musical.
For sure.
Yeah. It's a very sort of like, oh, that sounds really old timey. What's the buzz?
But I don't even hear it like in other contexts from that time period.
Yeah. Was that, I don't know if they originally wrote that or if that like was a common phrase.
I don't know. Our teacher told us it was, but I kind of don't believe her.
Well, you were probably taught a lot of things. So.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like Call Me, Beat Me If You Want to Reach Me from Kim Possible.
Okay.
You're too old for that, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that was my like prime age.
Too young for What's the Buzz, too old for Kim Possible.
Not a girl, not yet a woman.
Yes. Also sung from a mountaintop. It's a catchy song, though.
It is. And this particular song is borrowing from Matthew 6:34.
Okay.
This is my only scripture I have for this, but
really?
I should have more, I know. But Jesus is saying, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own.
I imagine if I were to read that in the Bible, I would think of Jesus as being very like calm and centered and saying that. And I feel like in this scene, he's just so irritated.
He's like, get away from me.
Yeah.
You sycophants.
I feel like he's very annoyed for most of the show.
I do too. And it's different from other interpretations. Like the 1999 one is a different interpretation. But yeah, I think he's very annoyed too and very still.
Yes.
In a way. He's a very still performer.
Now, I thought Ted Neely's singing was excellent.
I thought his singing was excellent as well.
And I did appreciate his sort of stoicness as Jesus. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he was like a very annoyed Jesus.
I struggled with the lip syncing aspects of this. And this is a show that I just so much respect to the performers because this would be so hard to lip sync to your pre-recorded track.
Yeah.
Like, my God.
And Carl Anderson didn't look like he was lip syncing once.
And that's what I love. I actually felt like they had two different directions in a way because I thought Carl Anderson really looked like he was singing. And I love that. I love when I'm watching something and it looks like someone is actually singing.
Yeah.
When someone's belting out something really high and their like mouth isn't moving, you know, like when they're barely moving anything, it doesn't feel as true to me.
Yeah.
And so I did really appreciate that about Carl Anderson's performance.
Yeah. Spectacular.
And when they were singing at each other, I sometimes felt like there was a little bit of a mismatch there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of, you know, Mary comes in and tries to cool Jesus' face. And Judas comes in and notice all the followers dancing and asking, what's the buzz? And then Judas sees Mary taking off Jesus' sandal. And Judas gets really jealous. And
you think he was jealous of Mary because he wanted to be close to Jesus?
Oh, yeah. Okay. What do you think?
I didn't read it as jealousy, but that makes sense.
Oh, I read it as jealousy.
Okay.
I really read that like Judas was in love with Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I was taking such like a surface level view of it, I guess. I don't know. But I like that interpretation.
I noticed it on the third viewing.
Yeah. I only watched it twice, so maybe if I had watched it three times.
That it was right after she took off the sandal.
Okay.
And
interesting.
And then that's when Judas jumped in. I was like, oh.
Yeah. This is a song that this Strange Thing Mystifying reminded me of Evita. There was a phrase in it that sounded like High Flying Adored.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And that happens.
There were many more Evita moments.
Take a shot every time there's an Evita moment. Please don't. Please live.
I wouldn't be able to finish the podcast.
You know, and Judas is basically saying, like, Mary, you are the implication is that she is a sex worker.
Right.
And Mary is a sex worker, and that he's like, doesn't help your ministry to be inconsistent and cavorting with whores is basically sort of the vibe of what he's giving off.
Yeah.
Jesus isn't putting up with it. He's like, you don't care. My followers don't care.
He's like, none of you care.
None of you care. It's real dramatic.
I know.
I'm
like, Jesus, why don't you just go home then? Like,
he doesn't. I don't know if he has a home.
He doesn't seem to want to be there.
No. You know, and the disciples are like, no, you're wrong.
Right.
They're like, you're wrong. And Jesus not having it.
Yeah.
What did you think of these like random pure choral moments in the movie?
Well, it felt like Evita to me, like, because in Evita they have like the aristocrats and they have like those moments. You know, I don't know. I like the music. I think Andrew does a good job of kind of like giving those different characters or groups of characters like a style or a theme. But it was a little hard throughout this movie for me to kind of follow, like, when are they his disciples and like when are they like an angry mob and are they the same people? I struggled with that a little bit.
That makes sense. And I think for me with the choral parts, I never quite knew when the crowd was going to be more choral and when they weren't. Because I feel like there were times where it wasn't quite that choral and I didn't quite know when it would be.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I also started to be like, I feel like the lighting in this movie is not the best.
I feel like no movie had good lighting in the 70s.
You know, they were just figuring out like how to light things outdoors.
Yeah.
And so, because they've been in studios the whole time. So maybe that's part of it.
Maybe.
But I was like, oh, this lighting, what is this?
What, like, print were you watching? Did you watch it online or?
Laserdisc. Yeah, I watched it on I think Amazon Prime.
Okay, so it was probably pretty high quality. I was watching a DVD, and I actually, some of the lighting I really liked I liked the cave lighting actually, and I liked a lot of the like magic hour lighting. But the bright day in the desert, I wasn't loving.
I feel like some of the Caiaphas
all the pre-scenes. Yeah. A lot of those are daylight.
I also was like, I'm pretty sure everyone is gay in this production.
The characters.
Yeah. I was like, everyone here is gay.
There's a lot of homoeroticism.
So then we cut to Caiaphas, who's the high priest of Israel, and he wants to get rid of Jesus. He's thinking about like when the Romans see Jesus crowned, like, do you think they'll stand around? I think he says. So Mary comes in and sings in 5/4. Everything's all right.
Yes, which I believe you had playing when I walked in. Well, you had What's the Buzz playing, and then this came on after. I did. You were sort of mockingly singing it, so that made me think you don't like the song.
No, actually, I do I actually think that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I actually really like the 5/4 in this.
It's a very lilting, soothing melody that fits the scene.
Yeah.
It's a very catchy song. Well, what I found interesting about this number is it kind of gives Judas like a sympathy moment where he's talking about like, you know, we spent all this money on these oils and things, like we could have done so much for the poor.
And Jesus is like, I want it. We can't help the poor.
Right.
I won't be here forever.
Jesus the pragmatist. Yes. Did Jesus know he was going to die like in the Bible at this point?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. It was an interesting, it does give Judas that. And also, I again think that Judas is like super horny for Jesus. Just the way he's looking at him and like watching the two of them together, watching Mary and Jesus together. I'm just like, he's so horny for Jesus. Like,
I'm going to have to watch this again.
That was I basically through the whole thing, I was just like, this is just such an attraction.
Yeah. So I'm here for it.
So Jesus does not relax. He's being told to relax.
He is not relaxed at all.
He's angsty.
Yeah, very much so.
Very angsty. So then we cut to, then Jesus must die.
Right.
And the Pharisees and the priests are like, Jesus is dangerous, and all the plebes are following him. Call the Roman guard. And Caiaphas is like, hold it. We need a more permanent solution. And so they're all trying to figure out how to deal with Jesus here.
First of all, this number opens with a bunch of birds. flying in the sky.
And you thought you were watching the birds.
Because then it pans down to like that structure, that like cage-like structure, which I think recalls the playground in the birds.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
You call it a structure. I call it scaffolding.
Sure. This was one of the songs that reminded me of, the like Hosanna Superstar theme that's like, da na 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 na. That reminds me of a theme in Evita, the beginning, like Eva and Magaldi, that number.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You're totally right.
Yeah.
What did you think of the staging of this number, this Caiaphas number, and the scaffolding and the birds?
You know, I don't remember the staging. I remember thinking it's quite a jaunty tune for a song about killing someone.
It's real jaunty.
It's very jaunty.
I found it to be really boring. Like, no one's moving or really doing anything. They're just like standing on scaffolding and then standing next to each other. And that's it.
Yeah. That rings a bell. I don't remember like being wowed over by it.
That goes to like, I feel like I had that experience quite a bit during the movie where I was just like, I feel like this is just, I'm just bored by this. But, you know, and being that they didn't direct any of it before they got to they just showed up and they were like, here's some scaffolding. Why don't we?
But I don't think that scaffolding was just sitting there though, was it?
Surely it was. No, probably not.
I feel like that set they must have built.
That must have been planned.
Yeah.
You know, and so the song ends with like, there's only one solution. This Jesus must die.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it cuts to Hosanna, which is a very like 60s type song, like a Flower Child sort of song of the 60s.
This and the next song are the only times that Jesus looks happy in the whole movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He does. He even joins in the singing. He's like, I'll sing with you. Hosanna, Hosanna.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a catchy number.
It is. And Caiaphas is like, Jesus, calm your people. And Jesus is like, if my people stop singing, the rocks would start singing my praise. So
he did say that.
He did say that, you know, and then he starts singing with them. And it ends. I didn't notice this until like the third time I watched it, that it ends with, hey, JC, won't you die for me?
Yeah.
What do you think of that moment?
Kind of chilling, especially because the camera stopped, like the frame freezes on Jesus' face.
It did freeze.
Which was a little bit, took me out of the moment, I would say.
Same.
I think you could have achieved a similar effect of just zooming in on his face, like a close up on his face.
I think so too. I think we can trust Ted Neely to follow through the moment with the expression rather than like, oh my God, we got the face we want. Stop.
Yeah, exactly. It was a little dramatic.
And I actually didn't notice that lyric until I watched the 99 version where it was just much more explicit that he was having a reaction to them saying this. And I think the freeze frame took me out of it too and distracted me from like the power of, hey, JC, won't you die for me?
Oh, interesting. So it almost like had the opposite effect on you.
I think it distracted me. And also in the 99 one, Mary's next to him in the moment. They're both kind of panicking at that. They're like, oh.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Interesting. I'm going to have to borrow that from you.
Well, there's another copy of it you can buy at Reckless Records. I can't give it up.
Oh my goodness.
I'm very protective of your
media.
Actually, I'm not at all. You can have it. I'll give it to you.
I was going to say.
It's yours. So then, speaking of camera and film editing, we got into Simon Zelotes.
I was hoping you would know how to pronounce this.
Well, he's called Simon the Zealot.
Right.
And so, but then is it Simon, is that like plural zealots?
Zelotes or zealots?
Great question.
I feel like you wouldn't need an E to spell zealots.
I know, I wouldn't think so either. So Simon Zelotes?
That's how I hear it in my head.
Okay, that must be it.
But I also say Frank Wildehorn, and there is no E in that.
Do you call him like Frank Wildebeest?
No, just Wildehorn.
Wildehorn, okay. Yeah. Okay. That's better than what I thought it was. Sorry, Frank. So, this is the Jesus, You Know I Love You dancing song where they're all just like, how would you describe this?
So, I didn't love the camera tricks that you alluded to, but I loved this number.
Say more.
I loved the music. So it's like a very upbeat, high energy dance number.
Wild,
where they're like,
one might say.
Yeah. And I mean, it was almost like they were filled with the spirit or
religious
something.
fervor.
Yeah.
Religious zealots, one might say.
You might say that. The music's very upbeat. I liked the tune. It's very catchy. The dancing is very like aerobic, and I was very entertained by this number.
I thought the dancing was great. I thought the faces they were giving so much face. They were just like so excited and filled with the spirit. Yeah. Then there was the camera or film editing. Which involved some slow-mo moments where they'd film some of the dancing in slow motion. There would be the freeze framing again.
It opens with them like doing forward flips. It's like an empty desert and then they sort of like appear. They fade in on doing these forward flips. Yeah. Like a mirage almost.
Yeah. And it did not work for me.
No, it didn't really need those tricks.
It didn't. I thought it was great. My other thought was, oh my God, it must have been so hot filming this.
I know. They must have been so sweaty.
So sweaty. And in this, Jesus again, he doesn't seem to be like totally into this in this moment.
No, but he does smile. But then this is where he kind of warns them, like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And Judas is looking on being like, see, I told you so.
Yeah.
Like
it's getting out of control.
It's getting out of control.
Yeah.
And then it transitions out of that into
Pilate's dream.
Oh, is that what's next?
I think so.
I have Poor Jerusalem.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. You're right. I was grouping those two together.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, fair. And Jesus is again like, you don't get it.
Right.
And Mary's looking at him being like, what do you mean I don't get it?
I feel like there's many moments in this movie where Jesus is singing and everyone's looking at him like, what are you talking about?
I think so too.
And this one is like the biggest one. At the very end, Simon's face is just so confused.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Simon, I am with you. I don't know what he's talking about.
But that's very biblical too.
Is it?
Yeah, he would say things and people would be like, don't know what he's saying.
Okay.
You know, because a lot of it was prophetic in a way or talking about, what's going to happen to him.
Right.
And so Mary was confused. Simon was confused. And then Jesus just kind of walks on by.
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, you all just close your eyes. He's like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
I found this boring too. Maybe it was necessary after the high dance number, but after it, Jesus is like, you don't know what you're talking about. And he's just like kind of meandering through the people sitting down. You know, and they probably needed to sit down. They were exhausted after dancing so hard.
Yeah. I mean, this also wasn't like a very catchy tune.
I don't think Jesus is necessarily given wasn't the catchiest moment. I also wrote down, I said, Simon looks at him like, what the fuck?
Yeah, there's so many moments like that, but this is like the pinnacle one.
It is. He's just like staring up at him like, okay, what? What do you mean? So then we get to Pilate's dream.
Yes. I thought this was very Simon and Garfunkel sounding, this song.
Oh, okay.
I also thought, is this what Liza would call a ballade?
It's definitely a ballade.
Yeah.
Liza would call it an Old English ballade.
It sounded very Greensleeves to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I also, again, it was just like a man singing. I feel like I didn't like the lighting, though I don't remember.
This is one of those harsh desert sunlight numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, and like he's just, nothing's really happening. He's just singing, which...
It's a sweet tune.
A sweet tune. And it's short. It's very short.
It's short.
Love Barry Dunnan, though.
Yeah.
Famously known as... Oh,
I don't know.
Oh my God. So there,
if I know him from something, I don't know what it is.
Barbra Streisand's like first boyfriend.
Oh.
Though I think she recently said that they never dated. So there's some controversy around this.
Okay.
But like he helped her, I think, form her
persona.
Her early ex. That's Barry Dunnan.
Okay. All right. So I do know who he is, but I didn't put that together.
You do.
Yeah.
So then we get to the temple.
Yep.
And they're selling goats and sheep and clothes and drugs and dancers and whips and grenades and machine guns and currency exchange and cash registers and mirrors and camels and pigeons and furs and coats and I already said currency exchange.
Wow. That's a very Tim Rice thing, I feel like, to kind of throw all those like funny, a menagerie of objects together.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Was that basically like Joseph when they're saying all the colors?
Yeah.
That's what that was.
I'm also thinking of like Aladdin, some of his lyrics from Aladdin.
And they're selling all these things in the temple, which how does Jesus feel about that?
Not good.
Not good. So he knocks over clothes and vases and postcards and a spinning mirror display and guns and money.
Yeah. And this is where I wrote, this show is time signatures gone crazy.
A lot of time signatures.
Yeah, there's no rest in this song.
No. There's a lot of energy. Jesus is not happy. He's like, get out.
Yeah. And then to calm him down, she calms him down, right?
First, the lepers.
Oh, the lepers.
So
oh my gosh, you're right.
To the scene with the lepers, which is a trip.
Yeah.
So Jesus is like walking through a random area and there are these things that look like rocks But then you realize they're
people.
They're people. Have you ever seen the BBC version of like The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe?
No.
Well, the witch turns people to stone, and when they are unturned from stone, it reminded me of this.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all of a sudden they're coming to, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's a person. Oh, that's a person.
Yeah.
And because their rags kind of look like
they're wrapped in rags.
They're wrapped in rags. Yeah. And they start to come to Jesus and be like, please heal me. And basically the stage direction for this was like slowly and agonizingly crawl towards Jesus until you overcome him. And that's what happens for the next 3 minutes.
Yeah. And he's so tired.
He is.
He doesn't want to do it.
He is.
I think he says, leave me alone.
He does, which actually, I think there's a difference in the lyrics in this from the Broadway production.
Okay.
Because I think in the show he says, heal yourselves or something like that. And in this one, he's like, leave me alone.
Yeah. Well, either way, he's had it.
He's had it.
Yeah.
And then we get to the scene you're ready for.
You're right. The namesake of our podcast.
Still feel it. I don't know how to love him.
So, well, we talked about my love of Carole King. Like, 70s soft rock is like my favorite genre aside from Broadway. And this song just like oozes that. And I loved this number. Yeah.
I struggle with the pitch on this number. Okay. I feel like there's a lot of notes where Yvonne never quite gets to the pitch. It's like,
interesting.
I don't know how to love him. We're like never quite like centering on the pitch at a lot of moments. And I actually have really had a hard time even getting through the number.
Oh, that's a shame.
I know. Even today I was like, maybe it'll be better on this listen. And I was like, no.
I will say last night I listened to her on the original recording and I did like that recording better, but just her passion and her delivery is won me over, I think.
That's fair. Yeah. There is a lot of passion in her delivery and like really loves Jesus and is trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Yeah.
Then we get, I wrote, she's giving it her all face-wise, but I just can't. Then we get to Damned for All Time, Blood Money.
Right. Love a song with a slash in the title.
My favorite type of song. So Judas is in the desert in the daytime, and all of a sudden he sees tanks coming in what appears to be like a hallucination or a fantasy. In my mind, I was thinking that maybe that was his fear of what would happen if Jesus kept ascending, that like the Romans would come and like cut them down in some way. And so that was his fear.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's right or not, but
that makes sense. I wrote down, is this a Vietnam thing?
Oh, or like, when was the war? There were a lot of conflicts in that time as well in Israel.
Were there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe it was about that or Vietnam or, so then he gets to, the scaffolding. Mm-hmm. And he climbs the scaffolding to get to Caiaphas, and he's like super defensive about how people will view him. And he's like, Jesus wouldn't mind if I was here with you. What are we, prophets? Like, who see the sad solution and know what has to be done? So he's very defensive, and he's like, I'm doing this because it's right.
To me, this scene, and especially by opening it with those tanks, it really kind of underscored like the power of the state. And like, it almost felt like he was making a plea bargain in this scene. Like, he was worried for himself, and so he was going to help them to kind of save himself.
I think that makes a lot of sense, that he was like, how do we save me? How do we save all of us, like, from this violence? I actually wondered something, and I think maybe we talked about this in the previous episode. I was raised in a very sort of Christian evangelical sort of background. I went to Christian school my entire life. I went to a Christian college. I went to church multiple times a week. And so I have a lot of that background. I don't think I've ever previously wondered, did Judas know that they were going to kill Jesus or not? Mm-hmm. And I wondered that watching this, because all he's doing is betraying where Jesus will be located so they can arrest him.
Right.
And the line is, they're like, we have the papers. We need to arrest him. You know his movements. We know the law.
Yeah.
Take our money. And what do you think?
I was thinking about that too, actually. I mean, I haven't had near the education that you have. Like, my education was, let's put on Jesus Christ Superstar. And so, I haven't thought a lot about it, but in watching this, I found myself very curious, like what was really written in the Bible versus what's portrayed in the show. And I was very curious to know, did he know what would happen? And I thought he probably didn't, based on this telling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or did he know it was going to happen and there was just a lot of denial
That
going on?
That too. And I think, the Bible doesn't give a definitive answer to a lot of these questions, and neither does the show.
And that is the end of Act 1.
Yes, but not in the movie because it just keeps going.
We just keep barreling through.
I was actually not even sure where the act break was in the movie. Like, I couldn't remember where it would have been in the show.
Absolutely. And it was this moment. And this is where I wrote in my notes, this is so much better than Joseph.
Tell me why you think that. I don't disagree, but I'm interested to hear why you think that.
It just feels like it's written for adults. And I think maybe that's a big part of it. Like, Joseph just feels so young to me.
It's much more sophisticated.
Absolutely.
The music is much more sophisticated.
Much more sophisticated. Yeah. And the story is much more sophisticated. The jokes even, and there's not a ton of jokes actually, but.
No, it's not a very funny show.
It's not. They try though in Herod's Number, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
Then we get into The Last Supper.
Yeah, this song is very catchy.
What do you like about it?
So I remember when we heard it in school and our teacher talked us through the whole show before we listened to it. And she talked about this song as being like, they're drinking wine, they're getting drunk, they're like very relaxed. And I do think the music really exudes that. It felt very Beatles-esque. It also has kind of an alma mater quality. Also in the lyrics, there's like, never thought I would be an apostle. There's like a certain brotherhood, like they're a fraternity. Yeah.
I think that's spot on.
I think it captures that well. I also, caught a famous sibling in this scene, Robert Lupone.
Really?
Yeah, he plays one of the apostles.
Which one's Bobby?
I don't know which apostle he plays, but there's a shot of him when they're at the Last Supper that is like right on him.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. Yeah. Love that. I also really liked this number too. And, there were some things about the filming, like the wine is Kool-Aid.
It's like light red.
It is. I was like, is it Tahitian treat? Did you ever have Tahitian treat? No, it's a soda.
Okay.
You would have that sometimes growing up. I was like, you can see through this. It's Kool-Aid. And they are singing that. And it really shows how like narcissistic the apostles are too. Cause they're all like, always thought that I'd be an apostle. And like, they're also like, I'm going to write my own story and people are going to remember me forever.
Yeah. Did I say never thought I'd be an apostle? Or can't remember what I said.
What is the lyric?
I don't know. Let me check because I have actually printed out all the lyrics, and the second time I watched it, I read through it as I watched it.
That's a real investment.
Sick, isn't it?
Well, I just put on closed captioning so I could.
I did that the first time.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Okay, so I think it's sort of a combination of what we said. It's always hoped that I'd be an apostle.
Oh, okay.
Knew that I would make it if I tried. Then when we retire, we can write the gospel so they'll still talk about us when we've died.
Yeah. They're like all into themselves.
Yeah. It's a cute song.
It is. It really, I think that fraternity part really hits the head on the nail.
Yeah.
And fits the mood of what they're doing. This brotherhood, this gay brotherhood.
We're going to get letters.
And so then, Jesus is like, one of you is going to betray me. And he and Judas get into it.
Yeah.
Judas is like, you know who it is. Just say it.
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, go betray me.
Go do it.
Go do it. And Judas is like, maybe I won't because it'll keep you from becoming famous or it'll keep you from achieving. It'll ruin your ambition. Oh, and then there's some wordplay I really like actually from Tim Rice. A play on the words Judas and Christ. Because Jesus says, you liar, you Judas. And he's directing that at Judas.
Right.
And then Judas says, Christ, you deserve it.
Yeah, I picked up on that too. And I wasn't sure. I mean, I'm sure he meant it as kind of a double reading. I
was like, oh, Tim, I like that.
There's always, with Joseph and this, there's always like a outsiderness to the show as it's being played. There's a framing.
And then Judas is upset and runs into a flock of rams.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, where did these sheep come from? Or whatever they are.
Well, I'm really bad at identifying animals. I don't know. And I was like, oh, be careful over there.
Quite a lot of sheep.
So many. And then the apostles are all like having an orgy and then fall asleep around a tree.
Yeah. And then isn't he like, maybe that comes later. But he's like, won't anyone stay up with me? Yes.
And I wrote, these homos are sleeping together around a tree.
They're not as into him as Judas is, I guess.
They're not. They had a moment and then they went to sleep. So they had a lot of wine too, to be fair.
Yeah. And then we go to the Garden of Gethsemane.
We go to Gethsemane, which is also a garden center in Chicago where I bought my Christmas tree this year. Shout out to Gethsemane.
Yeah, be a sponsor.
Be a sponsor. What did you think? So first of all, I think this is such a powerful song.
It's an amazing song.
It's so well, and I hate to admit it, but I just think it's so well written and it's so powerful. The lyrics, the songwriting, like just the intensity of it really fits this moment of Jesus realizing he's going to die.
Yeah.
Or coming to this acceptance that like, if this is what's going to happen, it's what's going to happen. And it's the whole, like, if this cup can be taken from me, please take it from me.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he accepts to the sunrise that which is God, the Father, that he's going to die.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. And it's a great performance by Ted Neely.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful song.
It is.
Yeah.
So the staging of it, again, I feel like they were like, okay, Ted Neely, we're going to have you climb this mountain in like 5 different locations. And then we're just going to splice it together into like whatever favorite locales from the mountain we have. We're going to splice together into the final take. And that was basically what it was. He just kept climbing the whole time until he made it in like various takes at various locales until he made it to the sunrise / God.
Yeah, and then we have another kind of non-diegetic moment that took me out of the film where they flashed like paintings
of the crucifixion.
Yeah, like iconic paintings.
Took me out of it too.
Yeah.
Totally took me out of it. I was like, wait, what is this?
Yeah.
There were some lines that like is probably how I feel about this podcast at times. Like, then I was inspired. Now I'm sad and tired.
Oh.
No, maybe not about this podcast, but I was like, I get that feeling.
Well, I did write that down too, and I was like, yes. Not for me, but for Jesus. Yeah. I'm like, you've been sad and tired from the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, a great number.
Great number. Also a moment of blasphemy, perhaps, because where it really just shows that the perspective of this musical is that Jesus is man and not God.
Yeah.
Because Jesus says, could you ask as much from any other man?
Right.
And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Some people aren't going to like that.
And I did read Tim Rice said, we take the perspective that he was a man.
Yeah, that was a clear perspective in this.
Yeah.
So then at the end of it, this number, Gethsemane, was one where I'm like, this really doesn't lend itself to lip syncing. This is so hard. And like, God bless these performers, but their lip syncing isn't always on. And it couldn't be.
Yeah.
I don't know how it could.
Yeah.
To like act it, but to be like recording it to whatever you're to your vocals of it.
Yeah. I was thinking about that, and we had talked a little bit recently about the Les Mis film. And I had said I felt like they did the best they could with it. And what I meant by that was, I think for that sort of sung through musical that's about very serious subject matter, as this one is, I do think that live singing, while maybe not as like technically beautiful, it does work better on film in telling that kind of a story through music. And this was a moment where I did miss that more realistic performance style.
Yeah. And I'm sure it would have like really opened up the actors too. I mean, to have to be like thinking about how did I record this again?
Right.
And matching.
Yeah. To like have to do your performance in a sound studio, like maybe even months before you're filming it.
Totally.
Yeah. It's got to be really hard. But he sounds amazing.
He does. So then Judas comes in with a kiss.
It's because he's been waiting for.
According
to your reading.
Well, also, Jesus knows who's kissing him.
Yeah.
He doesn't see that it's Judas, but he feels those lips and he's like, this is Judas. So what does that tell you?
He's been wanting it.
Or maybe that Judas has kissed him before.
Oh.
Because he recognizes him by the kiss.
Man, I need to go back to like my queer film theory classes and brush up. I'm just like not having a queer reading.
Season 2. I at least felt that was another queer moment, but
I thought it was like a very touching moment. Of course, it's the kiss to let them know who to arrest. So there's a dark twist to that kiss.
Very dark.
Yeah.
And then there's the arrest, and the disciples wake up singing "What's the Buzz" with pitchforks in their face.
But I kind of thought that was a good reprise of the song.
Okay, yeah.
I liked that they were bringing that back in a way that's like, what literally is happening right now.
I liked the reprise of the song. I don't know if I liked the staging, because I feel like if I woke up with pitchforks in my face, I wouldn't be saying, "What's the buzz?" I wouldn't be like, "What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening." I'd be like, "Get these out of my face. Oh my God, I'm terrified."
Maybe they were hungover.
Maybe they were just a little groggy and it took a little bit to wake up.
Yeah.
And then they march to Caiaphas.
Yeah.
And on the way, Jesus is interviewed by the crowd, and the crowd kind of takes on, I feel like, a paparazzi sort of interview.
Yeah.
They're like, "What are you going to do, Jesus? What are you going to do?" And like people almost have like fake microphones in his hand and in his face.
This is where I started to get confused about like, what's the mood of the public?
They turned rather quickly. They do. In fact, I wrote like 3 lines down. The crowd turned on him quickly.
Yeah, they really did.
Because I think they're like, "Oh, you'll just love seeing Caiaphas.
Right.
You'll just die in the high priest's house."
Yeah.
You know, that was supposed to rhyme. Caiaphas, high priest's house. Ish.
Maybe.
Near rhyme.
And
which was another play, right? Another, or is that foreshadowing? Dramatic irony, foreshadowing? You'll just die in the high priest's house?
I don't, both.
Yeah. One of those terms.
Yeah.
One of those literary terms.
Both,
Season 3. Literary terms.
Yeah.
And then it is in this moment that the crowd turns on him at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, by the costumes, I was like, these are the same folks who were singing Hosanna.
But that's also very, biblical.
Okay.
In that, like, the people who are singing Hosanna at the beginning of the 6 days or 7 days in Jerusalem then turn on him at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. So that tracks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess to your point about the microphones and whatnot, like that was also part of the conceit of the telling and the title, Jesus Christ Superstar, of like exploring him as a celebrity.
Yeah. And then going back to that, like exploring him through the paparazzi in a way of like hounding him and like, what are you going to do? So then we get to Peter's denial.
Yeah.
And he's denying, and Mary's looking onward and being like, "How dare you?"
This song, I feel like I know it's an important plot point in the Passion, but I felt like this scene didn't do much for me.
Yeah. Well, because we didn't learn much about Jesus before that, or about Peter before this, right?
No.
Peter's not like a major person.
And it just seemed like, the way it's shown, it seemed like he met this chick at a bar, and she was like, "Weren't you with that Jesus guy?" And he was like, "No, that wasn't me." And Mary was like, "Peter, you just like
betrayed."
Yeah. But it didn't feel like it had the weight. I didn't understand what the big deal was, I guess.
Yeah. The one part of it that I thought I think that's exactly what it was. The one part of it I thought worked, or that I was like, "Oh, Mary at the end of it is like, Jesus said that you'd do that. I wonder how he knew."
Yeah, that part resonated, but I just didn't feel the gravity of, I guess just now even your closest disciples are turning against you.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's what it is.
Yeah.
But being that there wasn't much of a buildup of the disciples or Peter as one. Apostles. Yeah. So then we get to Pilate in Christ, the number.
Yes.
And Pilate's like, "You're small. You're so small and not my problem."
Right.
And there's some 7/8 in this number.
And this tune reminded me a bit of, I don't know if it's on any of the recordings, but in the show Joseph, when they're going to Egypt, there's a instrumental tune that this tune reminded me of.
Oh, it's like the same song.
Similar.
And then Pilate's like, "Get away from me." And I think then Jesus goes to Herod.
Right.
So Herod's song.
Yeah.
If you had to guess what my thoughts are on Herod's song, what would you guess?
That you can't wait to sing it at open mic.
Oh my God. Oh, Lord.
I don't understand how this is a rock song. It sounds like circus music to me.
Well, you know that it wasn't written for this show.
It was written for your Eurovision contest, right?
It was written for a Eurovision contest.
It doesn't even sound like a Eurovision song to me.
No. And it's very like sort of vaudeville.
Yeah.
Or, like old English, like bar. I don't know.
I wrote like Charleston ? Vaudeville ?
Yeah.
I couldn't quite place the genre, but it also reminded me a bit of Potiphar. In its tone, like in its mood, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminded me of what they did so much in Joseph, which was like taking a random style and being like, here it is.
It did, yeah.
And it did not work for me. I get why they did it because to like provide some comic relief in this moment or some levity, which I get the need for that. It just didn't fit. It felt so out of place for me. I don't know. What do you think?
No, it's not. I've never liked this song, and it never felt of a piece with the rest of the show to me. I guess one thing that sort of worked for me, the way they filmed it, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it reminded me of the Manson trio scene from Pippin, which wouldn't have come out before the album, but would have come out before the film. And so, and I don't know Pippin well, but the Manson Trio is kind of this like dance number that's sort of meant to, I think, seduce the viewer into not seeing the darker thing that's going on. I felt like that treatment felt appropriate for that storytelling moment of like, oh, we're having a fun time, but there's something darker going on.
Yeah.
But I've never liked this song.
No, it wasn't written for the show and you really feel it.
Yeah.
There's also one of those rhymes that I'm like, this probably works again better in British English. Lord and fraud.
Oh yeah.
Where you're like, Lord, fraud.
Yeah.
You know, which, yeah. Then we get to Could We Start Again, Please? Mary's, so I bet you loved that song.
Another great, like, California soft rock song. Love it.
And I wrote, again, Mary with her terrible pitch.
I think this was new for the film, this song.
Oh, was this a new one?
I think so.
Okay. That makes sense.
It's not on the original album, at least.
Okay.
It also sounds like Tell Me on a Sunday a little bit. It's got that quality to it. It's an Andrew Lloyd Webber pop song.
And again, Yvonne is giving her all.
Yeah.
Giving her all in this. And then everyone else joins in and they're like, you've made your point. You've gone a bit too far to get your message home.
Yeah.
Can we start again?
Yeah. She's not going to abandon him, but she does want to backtrack.
She's not. And then you see a little bit of Judas in this too. And there's again this love triangle. I think you see Judas in this number. And there's a little, the love triangle again is showing up in my mind of like, there's Mary and there's Jesus and there's Judas. And then we get to full on Judas again in Judas's death. I thought that this was a really good portrayal of self-justification, the social psychology concept of self-justification.
Tell us more.
Just that, like, so we all have an inherent need to view ourselves as good people.
Right.
And so when we do something that seems to not go along with being a good person, it creates cognitive dissonance. And so we lessen that dissonance by justifying our actions, engaging in self-justification. And so he's saying all sorts of things that are like just trying to justify, like, basically like I acted for our good, all these sort of things. Like I had to do it.
Yeah.
I had to do this. I didn't have a choice, you know.
He doth protest too much.
You know. But he also worries, does Jesus know that I acted for our good? I don't believe he knows I acted for our good.
Well, Jesus told him to do it.
He did. There was some confusing motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he says, God, I'll never know why you chose me for your crime, for your bloody crime.
Mm-hmm. Which again is kind of like taking the, like, it's not, I didn't do it. God made me do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like what a child would say when they're like, my brother. You know,
right.
They made me do it.
Right. But yeah, powerful moment for Judas.
Yeah. And then he sings, I don't know how to love him.
That's right. Yeah.
Which felt very gay to me again. Did that read?
It did. You know what? I think I also see like everything as gay.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I was just kind of like turning that down, turning that lens off and watching this. I don't know. I don't know why it wasn't like jumping out at me more.
Flagging.
Yeah.
Listener, let us know. Was Judas gay? Was Judas in love with Jesus? You know, I thought Judas's obvious homosexuality is how I wrote it. Was an interesting choice. And just especially as it would read in that time. And I think we can talk about the casting. We'll get to that. We'll get to the casting of Judas in a little bit because there's some controversy around that. You know, and then I thought there was this beautiful So Long Judas sort of oratorio choral.
Yeah. Those like almost, because you don't see those voices. So it reads to me as like angels.
Yeah. And it very much had an oratorio, sort of like now the choir is singing about this sort of feel to it.
Right.
So before that, Judas takes off his shirt to hang himself. So we have shirtless and jarring. I don't know. I found that scene jarring because all of a sudden he's hanging. He uses his belt to tie a noose from a tree and he's hanging from a tree.
Yeah.
And I think particularly the image of a black man in 1973, you know, hanging from a tree in that way.
Yeah.
I think was a very evocative image evoking lynchings.
Right.
So I found it really jarring in a powerful way.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
So then we get to the trial before Pilate, and Pilate's like, why is Jesus here? And I loved Barry Dunnan as Pilate.
He was excellent.
I thought he had such like drama.
Yeah.
And almost campiness to the performance.
Very campy.
Yeah.
But not like the Herod song campy.
No.
There was still like a truthful foundation to it.
Absolutely. And this show has to be campy.
Yeah.
Because it's so over the top. Like, and I think that's, I liked in a way when the movie embraced the campiness or the over the topness of it all. I thought that Carl did a great job with that. I thought that Barry did a great job of that. And their characters maybe are also a little bit more intense in that way. I don't know. But I really liked that kind of power that he brought to it.
He did. This is one of the more, I think, impressive musical scenes. Mm-hmm. It's not a scene that I like very much because of what's happening. And the music is very dark.
Very dark.
But it's very effective.
Yeah, very effective. The music is very dark, very dissonant. There's a lot of dissonance in this show as a whole. I mean, it's not pretty.
No.
It's not sort of sweeping melodies. It's generally very, very grungy in a way.
Yes.
In this number too. And then there's the flogging that's happening in this number.
Yeah.
And the counting of the lashes.
Yeah. And that it's like, I feel that the writers did such an effective job of creating something where it's so hard to watch, but you also like can't look away or like turn your hearing off because the way that the tension and the music keeps building with each lash is just so, it's like addictive almost.
Yeah, there's this driving feel of this rock song. And I think this ascending brass pattern as the numbers keep going too.
Yeah, the brass was so intense.
Yeah.
And then Barry Dunnan's like,
shouting out.
Yeah, his mounting tension and volume throughout.
As we get up to 39 lashes.
And also the way you can see his internal struggle too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was not necessarily wanting to do this.
Right.
But also at the end of the day, him being the one that has the power to stop it and not.
Right.
Very, you could at best say complicit.
Right.
and I think probably more accurately, someone who's really abdicating his responsibility and is ultimately responsible.
Yeah.
One biblical historical reference to throw in here is that flogging is not so nearly as simple as it appears in movies like this.
Okay.
From my understanding of what flogging is, they were generally getting, there might be rocks or bone fragments on the end of that. And so it's like tearing skin, you know?
Yeah.
So it's still very powerful without showing that. But whenever I see a sort of Hollywood flogging, I'm like, okay, this is very Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's not even really demonstrating how, I think through the music, they demonstrate how powerful and awful this is.
Yeah.
If not through the staging.
Yeah.
Pilate's like trying to get out again. The crowd's like, you have a duty to keep the peace. And then Pilate washes his hands of the whole thing. Literally washes his hands.
That bloody water.
Yep. And then we jump to Superstar.
Yeah.
We see Ted, we see Jesus in kind of the white robes where he'd been flogged. And then all of a sudden in sort of glowing.
Yeah. Like a very clean sateen white robe.
Yeah. That had a resurrection feel to it.
Yeah. I'll buy that.
And I was like, oh, is this them showing the resurrection? But he hadn't been crucified yet.
Right.
But it was very like Jesus coming back after. Yeah, it was very resurrection. I don't know.
Yeah. It definitely had kind of a afterlife or just like a alternate universe quality.
Mm-hmm. And in those sort of like old like pictures that you see of like white Jesus, where you see him like ascending, he's in like white robes like that.
Yeah.
So, and then we get into Superstar.
Yeah. And I felt like it was also kind of a resurrection for Judas. Like he comes down from heaven. Yeah.
On a star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In his white with all his tassels.
With all those tassels. I loved the sort of disco-y vibe of this one. And I honestly thought this was probably the best number. For me, this was my favorite number in that it had the most concert feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked better for me because they weren't trying to make it in some ways more realistic. Like this clearly was not realistic. It was just them performing.
Right.
Again, it's, who played Judas again?
Carl Anderson.
Carl. Oh my God. Giving like the performance of his life, you know, like just so energetic and so powerful with all these like other dancers and singers.
Yeah.
I struggled with pitch again on this one. And it wasn't Carl. It was the chorus.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, we're not all singing the same pitches there. Okay.
I think my ear is not what it used to be because pitch doesn't bother me very much these days.
Oh, I'm just like so well trained.
I know. Well, you do have more training than me.
But I was bothered by the pitch in this too. The sort of choral. I was like, oh, they need someone to help them match pitch here. I actually wrote this down because I didn't really enjoy this movie. And I said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Andrew Lloyd Webber's work makes a terrible movie somewhat bearable. Like,
oh, wow.
I thought that the music and the lyrics were definitely the high point, and the performances were the high point of this. Then we get to the crucifixion. We're almost to the end, and it's always really painful for me to watch a crucifixion scene. It's just very powerful watching Jesus up on the cross, nailed into the cross with the crowd around.
Yeah. I was glad they spared us a close-up of the nailing.
Oh, yeah. That's so hard to see.
Yeah.
The line was a little different from at least my translations of the Bible when I was younger. Jesus says, my God, why have you forgotten me? And I'm more familiar with why have you forsaken me?
Right.
So it had a different sort of feel to it.
It's a lonelier feeling.
Yeah. Rather than a rejection in a way. Like, when I think of forsaken, I feel like, why have you rejected me in a way versus why have you, not abandoned.
Yeah.
And then,
I liked the underscoring here, the jazz piano. It felt a little bit out of place maybe with some of the other music, but I liked it.
And this whole scene's almost out of place, but not about like it's just so different, so it makes sense to have something that sounds different too. And
I think it's such a high energy piece on a whole that when you get to this part, which is so heavy and so sad, it is kind of a nice almost like release, or just like it kind of helps you just have that emotional rest. Yes. I think what also helped with that was the sudden silence when Jesus died, and there's no music. I really appreciated that too, because I think I needed that rest, that release too, and that solemnness, like that moment of silence. And then it's John 1941, right?
Say more.
That's the name of the song. That's the name of the like instrumental that closes the piece.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, which was on the B-side of the original single. The Jesus Christ Superstar single. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is an instrumental of Gethsemane.
Yeah. And it was beautiful.
Very beautiful. It is a nice, like, sort of come down from everything that you've just experienced.
Absolutely. And then all the actors, you see Mary walking back on the bus. You see Pilate, you see Herod, you see Judas. He's the last one to get back on the bus. But who don't you see?
You don't see Ted Neely.
You don't see Ted Neely. You don't see Jesus getting back on the bus.
No.
What happened? Is he on the cross?
But then you see the cross and he's not on the cross.
You do. But then you see a shepherd shepherding some sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Jesus?
Who can say?
Who can say?
It's open to interpretation.
It is.
Like so much of this piece.
So much of it. And then I really appreciated that the credits were also in silence and there wasn't some sort of like pop rendition of someone singing.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine?
Who would it be? Like all of a sudden you hear Karen Carpenter singing I Don't Know How to Love Him over the credits.
Yeah.
And I love Karen.
Right.
This is not a reflection on Karen. But it would just be so inappropriate. Like I thought that was a really good choice to not have some sort of pop vocal over the ending credits.
No, and I actually sat there and watched the credits in silence in my home, which how often, I mean, I do that in the theater a lot, but how often do you do that in your home?
No, because you need a moment. You need a moment to breathe and kind of to come out of what you just experienced.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
All right. Well, that's the movie. So, Adam.
Yes?
What was the reception of this movie when it came out?
You know, it was mixed, Anthony. It was a mixed reception. Some people really liked it. Roger Ebert. I love reading a old Roger Ebert review, and Roger Ebert was a fan.
Okay.
He said Norman Jewison's Jesus Christ Superstar is a bright and sometimes breathtaking retelling of the rock opera of the same name. It is indeed a triumph over that work. Using most of the same words and music, it succeeds in being light instead of turgid, outward-looking instead of narcissistic.
Oh my.
Jewison, a director of large talent, is taking a piece of commercial schlock and turned it into a biblical movie with dignity.
Wow. Tell us what you really think, Roger.
I know. Leaving no stones on
Throne.
Throne. Yes. And then the New York Times also liked it. Howard Thomason in the New York Times said Broadway and Israel meet head on and wait, never mind.
Yeah, I don't think he liked it.
No. And disastrously.
Yes.
Maybe he's being ironic. In the movie version of the rock opera Jesus Christ Superstar produced in the biblical locale. This mod pop glitter, the musical frenzy, and the neon tubing of this super hot stage bonanza encasing the greatest story are now painfully magnified, laid bare, and ultimately parched beneath the blue, majestic Israeli sky as if by a natural judgment. I had a couple issues with Howard's review that I think really are indicative of some of the racism of the time and some of the really more subtle racism of the time. But he says, the director has elicited sturdy performances from Ted Neely in this role and from Carl Anderson, a black actor who portrays Judas, you know, and like only when the actor is an actor of color.
Yeah. Like, why do we need to call that out?
Yeah. Versus like, it's not like Ted Neely, a white actor.
Right.
Like, and then there's also another quote was, they sing well and almost continually for some 28 numbers, but their bizarre garb, ranging from Alibaba to platinum blonde transvestite, is a far out put on that signifies the rigging of the whole enterprise as on stage.
Who was the platinum blonde in, let's say, in drag?
Yeah, I wonder if that was.
I don't even remember.
Oh, no, you're right, because this is the movie.
I mean, maybe one of Herod's, like, harem people.
Yeah, maybe. So some of those, some of the things that Howard put in his review make me less apt to really take in that review, the New York Times review of the time.
Yeah.
Paul Zimmerman in Newsweek said it was one of the true fiascos of modern cinema. Lord forgive them. They know not what they were doing.
Oh my goodness.
And then I think it got a good review in the LA Times and a bad one in the Washington Post. Okay. So it was a mixed reception.
And do you know what Andrew thought?
Oh, he hated it.
Did he say why?
He didn't have much control over it. Right. And that was a big issue because he wanted to have a lot more control over it. He was mad that he was fired from the orchestrations. That was an issue he had.
I feel like in the credits it said orchestrations by Andrew Lloyd Webber, but maybe it's like a screenwriting thing where like you have to contribute a certain amount to get a credit, and maybe he had contributed the majority. So. Maybe
I don't know. I know he didn't. He also has said many times, and I agree with him on this, that the show works best when it's closer to its concert roots.
Yeah.
And so I think that was possibly another issue that he had with it, is that it was so far away from its concert roots. And indeed, the moment that I thought was the best was Superstar.
Yeah.
Which was very close to a concert roots. Yeah. And so I thought that really worked.
Yeah.
You know, but it sounds like this production, along with the original Broadway production, he was largely cut out of the creative process, which I imagine did not happen for many of his future productions.
Perhaps he overcorrected.
perhaps. But he was like, I'm not going to get cut out again.
What were some of the controversies around the film?
So there were a number of controversies around various aspects of this. The recordings, the film, the Broadway show. So when we get to the recording was banned on the BBC.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was viewed as blasphemous.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess they do have the Church of England, and there are like a Christian nation, right?
Yeah. That's such a good point. And I always forget that when I think about some of our like freedom of religion, freedom of the press things, and that other countries have different governmental setups. Mm-hmm. So I guess that does make sense that there could have been some banning of that at the time. So it was viewed as blasphemous by the Church of England, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of controversy around the Broadway show when it opened. There were protests outside the Broadway show when it opened.
For what?
I think there were Jewish groups and Christian and Catholic groups that were outside, like Protestant and Catholic groups that were outside of it protesting. I think Jewish groups were protesting it more as anti-Semitic, and this narrative that the Jews were responsible for the death of Christ.
Yeah.
And I think Catholics and Protestants were protesting it more as blasphemous, as Christ being depicted as a man, as being depicted as someone who maybe had some sort of relationship with Mary Magdalene. And so there were some reactions to that and protests at the opening night of the Broadway performance.
Oh, wow.
And there were reactions to the film as well. The film itself had reactions specifically from a Jewish organization called the National Jewish Community Relations Advisory Council. And they accused Universal Pictures and Norman Jewison, the producer and director, of creating a, quote, insidious work that distorts the Bible. And they said in their statement that they described the motion picture as worse than the stage play in dramatizing the old falsehood of the Jews' collective responsibility for the death of Jesus.
Wow.
In contrast somewhat, apparently, I think Norman Jewison or someone showed it to Pope Paul VI, and Pope Paul VI loved it.
Okay.
I think it was around that time, perhaps. And within Christianity, there were some divided takes. Some people viewed it as a fresh look at the New Testament, while others saw it as offensive or blasphemous. And thinking back, this was 1973, and we had a recent production of it with John Legend and Sarah Bareilles in 2018. And I'm trying to think back to any sort of reactions to that production.
Yeah, I can't remember any controversy about that.
I can't either. And I feel like that tells us a lot about just maybe 50 years of history. Around the time of the movie and the show, Vatican II had recently been, I don't know if passed is the right word. I don't know what the word is for Vatican II.
Taken place.
Yeah. And, in Vatican II, there was a declaration that Jews are not to be blamed for the death of Jesus of Nazareth. You know, and so at the time that this was created, it would have been much closer to Vatican II. And now there's been generations of people that, at least within with the Vatican's teaching, are saying that Jews are not responsible for the death of Jesus. And thinking to my religious background and things that I've been taught, I don't remember ever being taught that Jews were responsible for the death of Jesus, or even that Romans were. I was taught that I was responsible for the death of Jesus. Yes. I was taught that we all bear responsibility, that Jesus came to die for our sins. And if even like one of us had sinned, he would have to die for our sins. There was never any emphasis on like these people were responsible or these people were responsible. I was always taught that if I had been there, I would have done the same thing. And that I bear responsibility because of my sinful nature for the death of Jesus.
You are such a sinner.
I'm such a sinner.
No, I never was taught that either in Catholic school or anywhere else in my life. The first time I ever even heard that narrative was when the Mel Gibson film, Passion of the Christ came out. And there were, that kind of stirred up controversy around that again. But that was the first, and I had never heard that narrative before then.
Yeah. and within how I was raised in Protestantism, evangelicalism, and I was not raised in a particularly liberal branch of it.
Yeah.
But that there isn't the same sort of belief that like Jews were responsible for the death of Christ.
Yeah.
There was also some controversy around the casting of Ben Vereen on Broadway as a black man in the role of Judas. And then in the casting of
Carl Anderson.
Yeah, Carl Anderson in the movie, another black man in the role of Judas. And I think the casting controversy being around Judas is this, the ultimate villain in many ways, viewed by people as the ultimate villain. I mean, the person who betrayed Christ.
The name is synonymous with, this is now a synonym for betrayal.
Yes.
A betrayer. Yeah.
And what does it mean to have a black man in this role, you know, as one of the leads in this role of someone who is the ultimate betrayer? And I think there were some reactions to that at the time of like, what is this saying that we have a black man as Judas and a white man as Jesus?
Did Norman Jewison comment on that?
He did. He basically was like, I saw
Carl Anderson audition, and like there was no other option. Yeah. Like he was just so brilliant. I couldn't imagine anyone else in that role. He's just phenomenal.
I couldn't either. And you know, thinking back to films and film history, like at the time we had Sidney Poitier, right? And when I think about black actors, like major black actors at the time, there was Sidney Poitier, Cicely Tyson.
Yeah.
I think Sounder was maybe around that time. But there weren't a lot of black actors that were allowed to play lead roles in movies. And I think about when any marginalized group, I believe, has such little representation, there's a lot more attention paid to what representation that they're actually given.
Yeah.
And so when there had been such little representation, and then the representation that they were given was this negative character.
Yeah.
Or what might be viewed as this villain, that there could be, reactions to that of like, are you saying that black people are villains?
Right.
You know, and then now looking in 2022 with there's a lot more representation in media. I don't remember there being any sort of controversy.
Well, the 2018 version, you had a black Jesus as well.
You had a black Jesus as well. And so we had a black Jesus and a black Judas, right? You know, but I wonder if that's, something where with more representation, an individual casting choice just bears less weight and responsibility. And going with what Norm Jewison said, like, I'm just so glad that Carl was cast in this role.
Yeah, I'm so glad we have this performance on film.
Absolutely. Like, I could just literally just watch his scenes and not the rest of it, because I think they're so good.
Yeah, he is the best part of the film, I think. It's great that we did have a black Jesus, and I don't remember that being a controversy.
I don't either. I'm sure it was somewhere, but I don't remember hearing about it at least. So, yeah. So, Anthony.
Adam.
I've been talking a lot.
Yes, I've been doing a great job.
Thank you. And I've been thinking a lot about this show. But I've been talking a lot. So I want to start with you.
Okay.
I'm wondering, what did you love? What did you not love? And what did you not know? Or what don't you know how to love?
Right.
It's important.
I didn't know how to love it, but now I do. No,
yes.
Just kidding. Okay.
So what would you say? What did you love?
Well, what I loved was those California soft rock moments. I don't know how to love him. Could we start again, please? There's a lot of great moments that just capture that kind of 70s Laurel Canyon sound vibe of all my favorite artists, Carole King, Carly Simon, James Taylor, Linda Ronstadt. And I loved that music in the show, particularly.
I love that for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Adam, what did you love?
You know, I have to say, I loved the score.
Oh, my...
Anthony just, like, made a hand gesture as if the heavens were parting.
Yeah, it's like, it took a musical about Jesus to get you to like Andrew Lloyd Webber.
It did. I loved the score. I thought the score and the lyrics, I thought they were really effective at portraying the drama, portraying the intensity of this story. And I thought that the rock medium really worked well for it. In general, I'm not the biggest into rock musicals.
Yeah.
And that's not a judgment on them. That's unfortunately, I wish I were more into them. I wish that was more within my ear. And it's generally not my favorite. And I thought it worked so well at telling this story. So yeah. I loved the score, I have to say.
Awesome. I'm really happy to hear that.
I feel sick, but so Anthony, what did you not know, or what did you not love? How do we say that?
Either way.
What don't you love?
So I don't love the more like harder rock, kind of darker, more minor moments of the show. Not because I think it's not good writing. I think it's very effective, as you just said. It's just not really my favorite kind of music.
Yeah.
And those scenes, like the 39 Lashes, as effective as they are, it's just not the song I'm gonna like tell Siri to play on my way home tonight, you know?
Totally.
So,
totally.
As much as I admire the artistry, like, it's just not my favorite Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yeah. And I guess to riff off of that, it's also not a show I'm going to listen to a lot.
Right.
It's just not something that like my ear gravitates toward, and that's no judgment on the work at all or the performances. It's just similarly, I think it's not my favorite style. Though as a theatrical piece, I think it's deeply effective.
Yeah. And so what would you say you don't love?
The movie.
Okay. Fair enough.
I don't love the movie. I don't think it's the best version of this. I have to agree with Andrew.
Yeah.
Good old, he and I were chatting the other week, and no, I have to agree with Andrew where he says that he thinks it's most effective when it's closer to a rock concert.
Yeah.
And I know I said it before, but I think those are the most effective moments. I think trying to make it more realistic at times just, it's almost like the Uncanny Valley, where the more realistic they try to make it, the less realistic it feels. I felt like the best, most effective moments were like Superstar, when it was just like, this is a rock concert. This is really embracing that medium.
Yeah.
And I liked the 1999 version that I watched that was much more that sort of rock concert vibe, much more of that sort of impression.
Nice.
Yeah. So what do you not know how to love?
I feel like I don't know how to love this show in general. And I don't mean that to say that I don't admire it. Yeah. I think, like I said, it's a more adult work than Joseph. And so I do admire the work that goes into it. I think I struggle with how to approach it. Is it an album? Is it a theatrical piece? Is it a concert?
Is it gay?
Yeah. Well, and I also struggle with, you know, the little Catholic boy in me struggles with like some of those questions that led to some of those protests of like, how am I supposed to take this in terms of what it says about religion? And so it just like, it's a piece that I just don't know how to approach. And I still haven't really quite found the way to approach it. But when I do see it every 10 years or so in some format, I'm always very impressed by it. And I feel like of all of Andrew Lloyd Webber's work, this is the one that theater people have the least problem with. Like I hear theater people gripe about almost all of his shows, but I can't say I hear them gripe about this one. I think it's the one that is the most like sort of universally appreciated. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel that. And
yeah.
I think had I known in 2018 what I know now, I would have made a point to watch that production.
Yeah. In my memory, it was spectacular. And I sort of watched it begrudgingly because I was like, it's not my favorite show, not my favorite music, but I wanted to check it out. And I was just blown away by it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny what you were saying about the young Catholic boy, because I think there's a part of me that's like the young post-evangelical that like relishes some of the blasphemy of it, or relishes being able to engage in a work that is less sacred.
Yeah.
It's a less sacred telling of these stories that I've been taught. I think there's a part of me that's like rebelling against some of those teachings.
Yeah.
And leans into that. But I get that part because I think there's moments where I'm like, oh, am I supposed to like this? Or, oh, what is this saying about the things I've been taught?
Yeah. What do you not know how to love?
This probably will come as no surprise. I don't know how to love Yvonne because I'm so sorry because you loved Yvonne, and I'm like, oh, I wish I knew how to love Yvonne. And similar to what you said, I was listening to the recording from the original Broadway cast, and I feel like the pitch was a lot better on that.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to it briefly, but I feel like she landed on the pitch more often than she did in the soundtrack.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, Yvonne.
It's okay.
I don't know how to love you.
Isn't that the biggest irony of all?
It is that I figured out how to love Andrew Lloyd Webber.
But not the woman who's saying, I don't know how to love
him. I'm like, I got it. I don't either.
This just got really meta.
It did.
I think we need to wrap it up.
This might be our last episode because I figured out how to love Andrew Lloyd Webber.
I'm sure you'll have plenty of thoughts on Evita. That's going to be our next episode.
I'm sure I will.
We're going to be watching the movie directed by Ellen Parker, starring Madonna,
where they change the keys.
We will also be referencing the very famous interview with Patti LuPone on Interviews, INNERViews.
Yes.
But yes, so we'll be watching that. So if you want to watch along with us, that's the one to watch.
And just to put it out there, we're watching that one because I believe it's the only one available.
It's the only one I know of.
so
unless you go to the Museum of Performing Arts, Library of Performing Arts in New York. Which,
when we start our Patreon, there will be...
You can donate to send us to New York.
To watch that production from there. Looking forward to it.
I mean, I love Madonna.
We'll see how this goes.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.